Hi, I'm Lori, and I was supposed to get married in peace. But instead of joy, I got a pastel invitation to my sister's baby shower on my wedding day. She didn't ask. She didn't warn me. She just assumed I'd cancel. Why? Because in my family, Selene always goes first, and I'm the one expected to smile and step aside. But what happens when the girl who's always quiet finally says no? And what if the baby isn't even real? The sun was hiding that afternoon, like it knew what I was about to hear. I had just finished tweaking my wedding seating chart, again, when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was my cousin Angie, the kind of woman who always sounded like she was halfway through a laugh, even when she wasn't saying anything funny. "Hey Lori, just wanted to check something real quick. Are you still set for the 14th? I frowned, glancing at my open laptop. Of course I am. Why? There was a pause. The kind that makes your skin prickle, even if the words haven't landed yet. "Oh, no reason," she said casually. "It's just, Celine's baby shower is that day too. At that wine barn place outside Olympia? Thought you might have moved your date when you found out." I stood there, still. Very still. "Excuse me?" She chuckled. "Yeah, you know how she is. Said it was the only day everyone could make it. Figured you'd understand. Didn't she call you?" I didn't answer. My eyes had drifted down to the RSVP list I had open, names color-coded by relation. A neat little grid of expectations and obligations. "No," I said evenly. "She didn't." Another laugh, lighter now. "Oh, awkward. Well, I'm sure it's just a mix-up. You two always figure it out." We ended the call politely, as women like us are trained to do. I stared at the screen until it blurred, then minimized the window. It felt like I was minimizing myself. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I made a cup of coffee I didn't want and stood at the counter until the light outside began to fade. Then, I did what I knew I had to do. I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice chipper, like she hadn't just watched a grenade roll into my life. "Hi, sweetie." "Mom," I said, "did you know about Celine's baby shower being scheduled for the same day as my wedding?" There was silence. A beat too long. Then a sigh. "Well, I thought you'd talk to each other about it." "Did you know?" I repeated, slower this time. "Yes," she admitted. "But honey, it's just a date. Celine said it was the only time that worked for her. You both have events that matter. Can't we be graceful about it?" "Graceful?" I said, feeling something hard and cold rise in my throat. "You knew I'd planned this date for months. You RSVP'd, and you still let her hijack it." "I didn't let her do anything. She made her decision. I didn't want to be in the middle. You girls can work this out." That was when I realized she wasn't in the middle. She was firmly on one side, and it wasn't mine. I ended the call without another word. I sat down on the edge of my bed, phone still in hand. I scrolled through our family's group chat. The baby shower had already been mentioned. Pictures of pink balloons. A Pinterest board full of sprinkle themes. Not one mention of my wedding. Not one RSVP acknowledgement in the last week. She didn't even ask. She just assumed I'd move. And everyone else assumed I would too. Because I always did. In every family photo growing up, Celine stood in the center. Smiling wide, framed perfectly. I was either out of frame or one shoulder in, half smiling. Invisible, but polite about it. Now she wanted to take the one day I had carved out of the calendar just for me, and she wasn't even subtle about it. I got up and walked back to the laptop. The honeymoon tab was still open. Jalen and I hadn't booked it yet, waiting on a few final confirmations. I closed the tab. The room felt colder than it should have. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, even though I wasn't cold. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a reminder. Final florist deposit due tomorrow. I dismissed it without thinking. The flowers would still come. The guests might not. I hadn't lost my wedding date yet, but it sure didn't feel like mine anymore. I slept in longer than I meant to. Maybe it was the weight of everything. Maybe just the silence of a house where nobody had your back. When I finally pulled myself out of bed, the clouds outside were still heavy, sagging like they hadn't moved since yesterday. The kind of sky that makes you feel like you're walking underwater. I made coffee and sat down at the kitchen table, laptop in front of me. I figured I'd at least try to get through a few emails before the weight of yesterday's conversation dragged me down again. But something nudged at me, something unfinished. I opened the family's shared Google Calendar, the one Maura had insisted we all use after forgetting my cousin's anniversary party last year. "Let's get organized," she said then, like we weren't already expected to orbit around Celine's plans anyway. My eyes scanned the list. Baby shower for Celine, June 14th. I scrolled. Again. Then slower. Nothing else was on the 14th. No note of my wedding. No Lori and Jalen. Not even a single letter. I refreshed it, just in case. Still nothing. I took a screenshot, then another, then one of the emojis. Might as well capture the tone of the erasure, too. My wedding wasn't just being overshadowed. It was being erased. Like it had never existed. I texted my cousin Drea. "Hey, did the calendar get updated recently?" The typing bubble popped up quickly. "Yeah, Celine updated hers last week. I thought you were rescheduling." I stared at that message, read it again, and again. I didn't answer. I took another screenshot, saved it to a folder I had quietly started on my desktop labeled Receipts. I moved over to Facebook and opened the private family group. I'd posted an engagement photo there 3 days ago, me and Jalen at Mount Rainier, wind in my hair, laughing for real for once. It had gotten a few polite likes, mostly from out-of-town relatives, but something felt off. I scrolled. It was gone, not buried, gone. I messaged Drea again. "Did I delete that engagement post?" She replied almost instantly. "No, I saw it yesterday. Did you take it down?" "No," I typed, "but someone did." I stared at the blank space where the photo used to be. Then, slowly, I uploaded it again. This time, with a different caption. Still standing. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't add hearts or emojis, just the words. An hour later, it was still there. No likes, no comments. Just there. I didn't need their praise. I needed the truth to leave a mark they couldn't wipe clean. I glanced back at the calendar tab. The pink hearts decorating Celine's shower invite danced like confetti in my peripheral vision. It wasn't a mistake. They didn't forget. They just stopped pretending I mattered. No one had to say I didn't belong. They just made sure there was no place for me to show up. I reopened my wedding planning doc. The file was titled Ceremony. I stared at it for a long moment, then renamed it Line in the Sand. Because that's what it had become. Not a celebration, not a party, a line. Between who I used to be and who I'd need to become if I wanted to make it out of this family's shadow. If erasure was their strategy, then presence would be my reply. 2 days passed, but the chill from that calendar still hadn't left my bones. I thought maybe a drive might shake it loose, clear the fog. When Maura called, asking if I'd come by that evening to look at a few wedding things, I agreed. Against my better judgment, but something in me still clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, she wanted to show up for me. The rain had started by the time I pulled into her driveway. Not hard, just the kind that lingers, tapping gently at your windshield as if asking permission to stay. She met me at the door with a soft smile and that familiar nervous energy, like she knew this was a peace offering, but wasn't sure I'd accept it. The house smelled of vanilla candles and something baking, manufactured warmth. "Come in, sweetie," she said. "I've been setting aside a few things." We moved into the living room. On the coffee table, there were some old wedding magazines, a few swatches of fabric, and a white garment bag lying across the couch. I froze. "I figured we could go over some ideas," she continued, already reaching for the zipper of the bag. "And I wanted to show you this." I didn't need her to unzip it. I knew that dress, every bead, every lace panel. I had zipped Celine into it on her wedding day 5 years ago, my fingers trembling behind her perfect back. And now, here it was, laid out like a solution to a problem I hadn't asked to solve. "You two are built the same," Mora said with a smile too wide to be casual. "It's such a shame to let it just sit in the closet, still pristine." I didn't sit down. I walked to the couch, ran my fingers once along the lace, and stepped back. "I already picked mine," I said softly. "I'm not wearing leftovers." Mora's smile faltered just slightly. "You don't always have to be so difficult, Lori. It's not about that. It's just practical." "Whose practicality are we prioritizing here?" I asked, but not loud enough to echo. She didn't answer. Instead, she folded the dress back into the bag with a sigh, as if my rejection was a personal affront. Like I had let her down. The TV flicked on behind us. I hadn't even noticed Benton come in. He settled into the recliner with a groan, remote in hand, not looking at either of us. I turned to him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" He didn't look up. "What's that?" "Did you know Celine planned her baby shower on my wedding day?" He nodded once, eyes on the screen. "Yeah." "Do you think I should move the date?" This time he glanced at me. Not annoyed, not angry, just blank. "Weddings are flexible. Babies aren't." That landed heavier than if he'd shouted. He might as well have said, "Your day's optional, hers isn't." "Right," I said, swallowing it whole. "Of course." Mora said nothing. She reached for a magazine, flipped a page. The dress sat folded like a pet they weren't allowed to keep anymore. I stood still for a moment, just long enough to feel the quiet wrap around me like a fitted sheet I couldn't breathe under. Then I picked up my bag. "No need to keep dinner warm," I said. "I've got things to do." "Lori," Mora called after me, "don't be like this." "Like what?" I asked, not turning around. But she didn't answer, because we both knew exactly what she meant. Like me. Always like me. By the time I got back into the car, the rain had picked up. I sat behind the wheel for a while before starting it. My hands weren't shaking. They were steady, almost too steady. I pulled up my phone and opened the Notes app. Started a new entry, "Conversations to remember." First line, "Weddings are flexible, babies aren't." I stared at those words for a long time, then added a second line, "I'm not wearing leftovers." It wasn't about the dress. It never was. It was about being asked to step into someone else's role, wear someone else's moment, fit into someone else's outline. Again, when people start handing you things you didn't ask for, they're also telling you to let go of what you wanted. I hit save, locked my phone, and pulled out of the driveway. There's no use competing for a place they've already assigned. It was never meant for me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the light rain had thinned to a fine mist, clinging to my windshield like a thought that wouldn't go away. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, watching the droplets gather and slide down in crooked little paths, unrushed, unapologetic. I'd meant to go straight inside, maybe make tea, maybe not. But instead, I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Celine's name. I didn't want to hear her voice, but I needed to. It rang 3 times before she answered, all syrup and sparkle. "Lori, I was just about to text you. I've been looking at baby-themed gift baskets. What do you think about lemon and lavender for your reception favors? I think they'd tie into the shower theme beautifully." I didn't even blink. "You're not serious about having the baby shower on the 14th, right?" There was a pause, barely perceptible. Then came the coup. "Oh, honey, don't be so territorial. You don't own a date. Babies come when they come." "You're not due for another 2 months, Celine." Exactly why this matters. It's the perfect time to celebrate her, while I can still stand comfortably and smile for pictures. And the family will already be traveling for you, so I thought, why not let them enjoy both? It's efficiency. There it was. Efficiency. She turned my wedding into a layover. "What you mean," I said, "is since people RSVP'd for me, You thought they might as well stop by your circus, too. Don't make this ugly, Lori, she replied, voice still coated in that artificial calm. You always find a way to make things difficult. I could feel my jaw tightening, but I didn't raise my voice. You didn't even ask me. I didn't think I needed to. We're family. We share. No, I said. You take. She went silent. I could practically hear her blinking. I have to go, she said eventually, voice crisp now. I have a call with the caterer. The line went dead. Not a goodbye, just a click. I sat still, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. Then, as if on cue, my phone vibrated again, this time a voicemail from Maura. Her voice was soft, like she was already halfway into a sigh. Sweetie, I know emotions are running high, but try to understand. Celine's going through a lot. She didn't mean to step on your day. She's just trying to make things work. We all are. She didn't mean to. That was always the excuse. For every overwritten birthday, every skipped school event, every time Celine got to shine while I was expected to applaud from the wings. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. Instead, I called Grandma Edna. I hadn't spoken to her since we sent out invitations. Hi, Grandma, it's me. Oh, Lori, sweetheart. Her voice was warm, familiar, like cinnamon toast. I was about to call you. I heard your wedding got postponed. That's such a shame. I blinked. Postponed? Maura said you were going low-key, that maybe a formal thing wasn't your style anymore. Celine mentioned something about a courthouse ceremony. My throat went dry. Grandma, I'm still getting married, June 14th. Same place, same everything. Oh, she said, faltering for the first time. Well, that's good. I'll make sure we have it on the calendar. I just didn't know what to believe. I smiled tight. Now you do. We chatted a few more minutes. I kept my voice light, but it scraped inside. After we hung up, I didn't move. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were rewriting me, like I'd decided to shrink myself, and they were just so gracious to go along with it. But I hadn't, and I wouldn't. I opened my laptop, clicked open a new folder on the desktop, and titled it, Proof, Personal. I began dragging files in, screenshots, voicemails, email threads, anything that, one day, if needed, would remind me I wasn't crazy, that this happened, that I was there, that I mattered. You don't argue with people who build stories. You build proof. If they're rewriting my story, I'd better start collecting the footnotes. The next night, I found myself scrolling through the family group chat again, something I had promised myself I wouldn't do. It was like pressing on a bruise, not because you wanted to feel the pain, but because you needed to confirm it still hurt. Aunt Claire had dropped another passive-aggressive gem. I just hope Lori comes around. Celine's in a delicate condition, and she's still being so rigid. Can't imagine how hard this is on Maura. Then Aunt Sherry chimed in, as if waiting for permission. I heard Lori's still moving forward with the wedding, like nothing's happened. That poor mother of hers. She's dealing with both girls and no peace. No peace. As if I had stormed through their lives in boots and flame, demanding attention and throwing tantrums, as if I hadn't spent 3 decades swallowing my voice to keep the waters calm for everyone else. What really pierced me wasn't their judgment. It was Maura's silence. She was in the chat. She saw it, and she said nothing. I didn't cry. That muscle had gone stiff from overuse. Instead, I selected the thread, copied the messages, and dropped them straight into the folder on my desktop. Proof, Personal. I created a subfolder that night, Narratives. If they needed me to be the villain, I might as well own the costume. At least then, I'd get to write my own script. I wasn't even done categorizing the screenshots when my phone rang. Unknown number. But I recognized the area code Olympia. I almost didn't answer, but instinct told me to pick up. Lori, hey, it's Camden. Of course. I hope it's okay I called. Look, Celine's been really stressed lately. And this whole thing with the date clash. I don't think she meant for it to get this far. I stayed quiet. You know how she gets with hormones, he continued, trying to laugh. Things snowball. We all just want peace. Hormones didn't book a venue and send out digital invites, Camden. He chuckled, nervously this time. You've always been a little intense, Lori. I mean that in a good way. You're driven. Just, maybe this time, consider pushing the wedding a week. It might make all the difference. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not rage, but something cleaner, sharper. Or maybe she could move her 4th baby shower. That landed like a flat note. He paused. She's got people flying in. So do I. I'm just trying to mediate. No, Camden. You're trying to smooth this over so you don't have to deal with the discomfort of your wife being who she is. Silence. I appreciate you calling, I added calmly, but let's not pretend this is about compromise. Before he could respond, I ended the call. I leaned back into the couch, the quiet stretching wide around me. That was the moment I realized they still saw me as the girl who would fold, who would smile for the picture while being cropped out later, who would bend because her spine was made of soft words and old expectations. They mistook my silence for softness. They'd mistake my calm for collapse, and I was going to let them for just a little while longer. I pulled up the wedding website and clicked into the guest section. I changed the visibility settings to private. From now on, only people in my confirmed circle could view updates. Then I scrolled through the contact list and started removing names. No explanation, no announcement. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was clarifying access. By the time I was done, the room felt warmer. Not happier. Just mine. The quiet one always hears the most. And I'd heard enough. The next afternoon, I drove out to the venue. 40 minutes of winding roads and slow radio chatter that barely registered. I needed the silence between songs. I needed the hum of the tires and the low vibration in the wheel to keep my hands steady. The closer I got, the more it felt like I was walking into someone else's story. When I pulled up, Ms. Hale was already waiting at the side entrance, clipboard in hand. She smiled warmly, the kind of smile you use with clients you assume are clueless but harmless. "Hi, Lori," she said brightly. "Glad you could come by. We had a bit of activity last week with some of your family stopping by, so I figured you'd want to confirm the layout." I blinked. "My family?" She nodded, flipping a page on her clipboard. "Yes, Maura and, I believe, 2 other ladies. They were lovely, very organized. They approved some table changes and asked to keep the slideshow digital only, to avoid doubling up between events." My stomach twisted, slow and deep. "Which events exactly?" Ms. Hale tilted her head. "The wedding and the shower, of course." I didn't answer. I just held out my hand. She handed me a printout. At the bottom, scribbled in precise cursive, was a signature I'd memorized by the time I was 10. E.M. Gorn. My mother had signed off on my wedding setup, without me. "Can I see the seating chart?" I asked, voice cool even. "Sure," she said, flipping to another page. "Here's the updated version we're working from." I scanned the names. Celine's friends, Camden's relatives, extended family. But Jalen's co-workers were gone. My art school friends, gone. My old mentor from Chicago, nowhere. I placed the printout back down. "This isn't my list." Ms. Hale hesitated. "Well, this is what they approved." I looked her dead in the eye. "You were told it came from me?" "Yes. I mean, it came from your family. I assumed it was coordinated." I nodded slowly. "Can you show me the AV setup? I'd like to run through the slideshow." We moved through the hall. The venue smelled like lemon oil and old wood, usually calming, today sour. The projector was already warming up as Ms. Hale handed me the remote. But before I could press anything, the screen came to life. Soft music played. Pink script shimmered on a white background. "Baby girl Shore, coming soon." It was a baby montage. Celine's baby montage. Ultrasounds, nursery paint swatches. her holding a bump that looked more like performance than presence. I didn't say a word. I turned to Ms. Hale. "Turn it off," she scrambled, fumbling with the remote. I thought it was the correct file. Someone said you wanted it replaced." "Did I say that?" "No, I assumed." "Don't assume," I said flatly. "Who gave you this?" She fidgeted. "A USB was dropped off under Maura's name. No direct conversation. I can check the logs." "Do that," I said, "and email me the access log. Every AV change since last Monday. I want initials, timestamps, IPs, if available." Her mouth parted like she wanted to argue. Then she caught herself. "Of course, I'll send that today." "Not today," I corrected. "Now." She nodded. I stood there for another 10 seconds before walking back to the front of the hall. I'd spent months building this day, picking every detail. Not because I was obsessed with perfection, but because I needed something, just one thing to be mine, to not be rewritten or replaced or negotiated. And now, it had been barged into, altered, and draped in someone else's narrative. They didn't even knock. I pulled out my phone and began a new note in the folder. Venue interference. Underneath, I wrote, "Proof they don't want a seat, they want the whole stage." I clicked save. If they could hijack the screen, they'd try to rewrite the whole ceremony. But they didn't know. I was the editor now. That night, after the drive back from the venue, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the projector scene like a bad movie I never agreed to star in. I'd muted all notifications, but the world had its own way of crawling in. By morning, the clouds hung low like someone had pulled the sky just enough to remind me I wasn't done yet. I poured half a cup of coffee, just enough to warm my hands. My laptop was already open on the dining table. The wedding folder sat next to the proof personal one now. The contrast was poetic. That's when Drea's message buzzed through. "Hey, did you really say this about Celine?" Attached was a screenshot, a text I had supposedly written. "She's faking it again." Typical attention grab. I blinked. My fingers went cold around the mug. It wasn't my voice, not exactly. Bits of old texts pieced together, Frankensteined into something cruel. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. The group it was posted in? One I hadn't been in for over a month. I replied simply, "Where did this come from?" "Drea." "Aunt Sherry forwarded it. I assumed it was fake, but figured I'd ask." I didn't respond. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message, the thread, the timestamp, dropped them into the folder. They weren't just spinning the story now, they were forging it. I opened a new document and began writing. Not a rant, not a defense, just facts, timelines, messages, names. Clean, chronological, indisputable. By noon, I sent a private message to 5 cousins who hadn't said anything public. Yet. Some of you have asked if I said certain things. I didn't. But since stories are circulating, I'm sharing receipts, not rage. Attached are screenshots and a voice memo from February confirming my wedding plans. I'm not asking you to pick sides. Just stop pretending you don't know there is one. I didn't wait for replies. I wasn't fishing for absolution. I just needed the truth in more inboxes than theirs. Later that afternoon, the mail came. I wasn't expecting anything, but there it was. A pastel pink envelope, my name written in my mother's handwriting. Neat. Precise. I opened it slowly, already knowing. You're invited to celebrate the arrival of baby girl Shore, hosted with love by Maura Gorin. A tiny note inside, scrawled in blue ink. We still want you to be part of this. Love, Mom. I held it in my hand a moment longer. The weight wasn't heavy, but it landed like lead. This wasn't an invitation. It was a performance. They wanted me to show up like nothing happened. Like I hadn't been erased, replaced, shoved out of my own moment. I took a photo of the invite, front and back, dropped it in the folder. Then I tossed the card into the kitchen trash without opening it all the way. The lid clicked shut like a punctuation mark. Back at the table, I reread my message to the cousins. No edits. No second guessing. Sometimes silence is strategy. But this was clarity. They'd built their story on silence. I just pulled the first thread loose. 2 days later, I stood in the corner of the private dining room, staring at the flickering candlelight bouncing off the glasses. Jalen was at the other end of the long table, laughing with his best friend Mark about some inside joke I didn't catch. Ione caught my eye from across the room and nodded. Quietly, steadily, like we'd rehearsed 100 times in our heads. This was supposed to be the soft moment, the exhale before the ceremony, the part where the bride thanks her people and breathes in the fact that it's all real. Instead, I was waiting for a bomb to drop. I should have known the second the room got too quiet during dessert. The side door creaked open, slow, deliberate. Celine entered first, wrapped in a silk dress meant for a gala, her hand resting on the curve of her stomach, like she'd been practicing the pose. Behind her, Maura, in navy, and Benton, who hadn't said more than 2 words to me in a month. I stood, my napkin falling from my lap. "We just wanted to drop by," Celine said, voice pitched to be heard over the low music. "To wish Lori and Jalen the best. And," she added, patting her belly with theatrical grace, "the baby sends blessings too." She smiled like she was on stage. Maura smiled like she'd been forced into it. Benton looked at the floor. I clenched the edge of the table. Jalen started to rise, but I shook my head gently. Ione stood, calm, steady. She walked over to the sound system near the bar, pulled out her phone, and plugged it in. No one knew what she was doing, until the speaker crackled. Then Selena's voice filled the room. "I just want everyone at the shower. Lori's crowd will already be in town. Might as well use the traffic." The air changed. Not a gasp, not a scream, just stillness. Celine's face froze. She blinked once, then again, like if she kept her eyes open long enough, it would all go away. Benton looked up, just for a second, then stared at his shoes. Maura turned red, not from shock, but from exposure. Celine opened her mouth, then closed it. Without a word, she turned and walked out. Benton followed. Maura didn't move. I walked to the front of the room, past the guests, past the uneaten cake, past the air that still hadn't recovered. I picked up the mic. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," I began, voice even, calm, collected. "But since the audience grew, here we are?" Some of the guests shifted, uncomfortable. Others leaned forward. I've spent most of my life being polite, quiet, understanding. I've smiled through every time I was told to be the bigger person, to keep the peace, to not make a scene. I looked at Maura. She didn't flinch. "I'm not bitter, I'm not angry. I'm just done pretending I don't see it." A beat of silence. Ione clapped first, then Jalen, then Mark, then a few cousins. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it wasn't silence either. Maura stayed seated, her hands folded in her lap, face blank. When I sat back down, I didn't feel powerful. I felt empty, not broken, just finished. As if some chapter I'd never wanted to write had finally reached its last word. Jalen reached for my hand under the table. I let him hold it. The room wasn't quiet because they were shocked. It was quiet because they knew. This time, they couldn't unhear it. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, the apartment was unusually quiet. Not just still, but intentionally so. Jalen had made coffee, set my favorite mug next to a folded napkin, and left for the gym without a word. He didn't need to say anything. He'd already said everything with how tightly he held my hand the night before. The sky outside looked like wet concrete. Rain drizzled against the windows in soft rhythms. I sat at the table, still in my robe, staring at the unopened text from Maura sitting on my phone. Instead, I opened the one from V. "Your mom's upset, but that audio? Wow. No one can spin it now." Short. Honest. No emojis. I didn't respond. On the counter sat a small gift box, wrapped in plain brown paper with twine. I recognized Ione's handwriting on the tag before I opened it. Inside was a neatly folded copy of the venue invoice, my name, my deposit, every item listed, and a note card taped to the inside lid. If they want to steal your stage, make sure the lighting is yours. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, folded the invoice into thirds, and slid it into an envelope. I didn't plan to use it, but I wanted it close. Later that afternoon, I walked to the bakery down the block. I wanted fresh air, something normal. The bells on the shop door jingled, the scent of warm cinnamon and rising dough hugging me as I stepped in. That's when I heard it. "Hey, Lori!" It was Trina, my neighbor from 2 floors down. We shared a laundry room and too many awkward elevator rides. "I thought the wedding was off," she said, smiling like she was discussing the weather. "That's what Selena's mom told my sister last week. Something about you changing plans? Hope everything's okay?" My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. I just smiled. "Everything's right on track," I said, picking up a baguette and placing it in my basket. "Thanks for checking in." She looked slightly confused, but nodded and moved along. I paid in cash. On the walk home, the air felt lighter, though the rain hadn't stopped. The gossip didn't sting anymore. It floated around like fog, easy to see through once you'd adjusted your eyes. At home, I opened the closet in my office, pulled a thumbtack from the corkboard, and pinned the invoice to the back wall. Not front and center. Just there. Quiet. Firm. A reminder. When I sat down again, the phone buzzed. Another message. Another relative trying to triangulate the damage. Maybe offer half-sincere sympathy. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I used to fight every untruth they told about me. But now, I just prepare the silence they'll never undo. It took 5 days before I even looked at my wedding folder again. I hadn't touched it since the rehearsal dinner, and every time I glanced toward that icon on my desktop, something inside me tensed, like it knew opening it would mean stepping back into the mess. But on Thursday evening, I got a message from the venue's assistant. Just a quick line, almost an afterthought. "Hey, Lori, quick question. Is your sister's shower still happening here? No decorations have arrived. No setup confirmations. Kinda strange." I stared at the screen. Strange didn't begin to cover it. A second message came a minute later. Also, she requested all the chairs face away from the head table. That felt off to me. Figured I'd ask. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my keys. The drive to the venue wasn't long, but every mile stretched like chewing taffy, sticky, slow, resisting the inevitable. The assistant met me by the back office, already apologizing for the clutter of rental boxes stacked near the hallway. "I figured I'd let you see the storage room," she said, "just in case anything's missing. There was a locked drawer marked M. Guerin. Thought it was yours." It wasn't, but I didn't say that. Inside, past racks of white tablecloths and flowerless vases, was a plain metal drawer. I knelt, tugged gently, and found it unlocked. Inside, one sheet of paper, folded once, thin, clean. I unfolded it and read. Event schedule, June 14th. Surprise pregnancy reveal, Shore family. No medical details, no due date, no contact info for a doctor or doula. Just a line at the bottom. Bring confetti poppers, pink. I didn't react. Didn't speak. I folded the paper back into its original crease and slipped it into my phone's frame for one photo. Then I put it back exactly where I found it. No emails, no texts, not yet. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to sit long enough to rot in public. Back home, the city hum returned like background music I hadn't realized I'd missed. Jalen was on a call in the bedroom. I walked through the kitchen, poured water for Emma, and scrolled through my feed out of habit. That's when I saw it. A new post in the family group. Celine had posted a photo of Emma, my Emma, wearing a pink sash that read, "Future cousin's best friend." The caption, "Even Emma's excited about baby girl Shore." My jaw didn't drop. My heart didn't race. I just stared at it, long enough to notice the background was our old backyard, before I moved out. The photo was months old, maybe even a year, and I hadn't given anyone access to it, except Maura. Through a shared cloud folder I'd forgotten to unshare. They'd taken my dog, or at least her image, used her as a prop. I shut the screen and called for Emma. She trotted over like she always did, tail wagging, not knowing she'd become part of a charade. I sat cross-legged on the floor and pulled her close. "At least one of us didn't need a fake bump to feel important," I whispered. She rested her chin on my knee. "I didn't take down the post. I didn't comment. I didn't message anyone. I didn't need to. Every move they made now echoed louder because I stayed still. You can fake a baby, a party, and even a sisterhood, but you can't fake the silence that follows when it all unravels." By nightfall, the air in the apartment felt still, like it was holding its breath for tomorrow. The string lights Jalen had hung above the windows flickered softly, casting a golden haze across our packed bags lined by the door. I'd folded everything with care. Flats in one corner, backup vows tucked into my carry-on. The pen I planned to sign the license with slid into my bouquet wrap. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just final. Jalen was in the bedroom, finishing up a last call with the officiant. I sat in the living room, barefoot, robe knotted at my waist, holding my phone like it weighed more than it should. That's when her text came in. "Celine. Hope tomorrow's peaceful. I won't be there, but you know I'm part of your beginning, even if it's just in spirit." I read it 3 times. The last line stayed in my throat like a fishbone. Part of my beginning? No. She was part of every detour I'd had to take to get to this one. I didn't reply. 2 minutes later, my voicemail notification buzzed. "Maura." I let it play on speaker. Her voice was shaky, tear-wet. "Lori, I know we didn't handle things right. I know you feel alone in all this. But can we still be your family? Please don't shut the door." I didn't cry. I opened my notes app. Started typing a reply. Stopped. Deleted it. Then I opened the group chat labeled immediate. I stared at the blinking cursor, then typed, "Please do not attend tomorrow. You've made your stance clear. This is mine. Respect it. After that, you're free from pretending we're something we're not." I hit send, read it once, closed the app. The sound in the room didn't change. The string lights still buzzed gently. The clock still ticked. Nothing exploded, nothing shattered. That was the point. Not every rupture has noise. I got up, walked to the hallway, and took down the old photo frame. It was the one from my high school graduation, Celine in the center, Maura's arm around her, Benton half smiling, me cropped slightly on the edge, holding my diploma like a prop. I slid the photo out of the frame. In its place, I put the black and white picture Jalen and I had taken last fall on our hike. We were standing on a ridge, wind tangling my hair, both of us laughing so hard we hadn't realized the camera timer had snapped. That was the moment I'd known I wanted forever with him. I hung the frame back up. Then I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my body finally slowing into the rhythm of closure. Jalen came out a few minutes later. "Everything good?" he asked. "Better than good," I said. "It's quiet." He nodded, reached for my hand, and squeezed once. As we stood there, the apartment dim and soft, I realized I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't hoping for some last-minute clarity from people who never saw me clearly to begin with. I wasn't breaking ties. I was just cutting loose the last weight that kept me from walking forward. The sun broke through the clouds just as we pulled up to the venue. It wasn't dramatic, no cinematic rays slicing through the sky, but enough to warm the back of my neck as I stepped out of the car. Ione was already there, standing by the main entrance with a paper cup in one hand and an envelope in the other. "Morning," she said, offering both. I took the envelope, recognizing her handwriting immediately. "What's this?" "Everything you might ever need," she replied, "in case someday someone tries to rewrite this too." I smiled but didn't open it. just slipped it into my clutch and gave her a look that said more than words could. "Thank you," I said. "But today, I don't need to prove anything." She nodded. No lectures, no long speeches, just quiet solidarity. Inside, the hall was simple. Rows of white chairs, delicate flowers lining the aisle, and empty seats up front marked parents of the bride. We hadn't filled them. We didn't cover them either. We just let them sit there, unacknowledged, but undeniably present. Ione helped me into my dress, fingers steady, lips pressed into a line. When she was done, she stood back and looked at me, her eyes wet. "You made it," she whispered. "Not quite," I replied, "but close." The ceremony itself was brief, clean, no readings, no dramatic music cues, just Jalen and me, two people choosing each other without the noise of expectation. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I leaned in with a grin that came from the base of my spine. And when I turned to face our guests, I didn't search the crowd for anyone missing. I looked only at the ones who stayed. Later, at the reception, I sipped champagne while watching my niece spin in circles on the dance floor. My cousins laughed in clusters. Jalen's mom hugged me so tight I lost balance in my heels. It was the first time in weeks I hadn't braced for a blow. Toward the end of the night, Aunt Therese found me outside under the string lights, where the air had cooled and the music played soft enough to think. She handed me a narrow box. Inside was a silver fountain pen, heavy in the hand, engraved with words that stopped my breath. To the woman who rewrote her story, without needing permission. I didn't speak. I just looked at her. "You were never lost," she said. "They just weren't looking hard enough." That's when I cried. Not because I missed anyone, not because the day was perfect, but because I had been seen, clearly, finally. When the music wound down, Jalen kicked off his shoes and led me to the middle of the grass. I followed, barefoot, my dress trailing behind. We danced with no rhythm, no steps, just soft laughter, and the knowledge that, for once, the story was ours alone. No interruptions, no performances, no one else's script. They tried to turn my wedding into a sideshow, but I made it my signature.